You are now listening to Protecting Your Nest with board-certified family medicine and obesity medicine specialist Dr. Tony Hampton. For more, visit drtonyhampton.com. Welcome to the Protecting Your Nest podcast. You know, as we prepare to enter into a new year, it creates a unique opportunity to right some of the wrongs of the past, especially if we've been victims of trauma. Did you know that according to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced physical violence by an intimate partner? This is a crazy circumstance, and it really paralyzes people who experience it, and it's just a terror to them. So now imagine having the opportunity to come to terms with those previous traumas, an opportunity to heal and an opportunity to move forward. So today I thought it would be nice to have a survivor of trauma and domestic abuse who is familiar with trauma and how to overcome it. And she's going to share her insights about that. Today's guest is Amanda Lee. She's the author of a new book, One of the Lucky Ones. I love that title, although it makes me a little sad at the same time, because there should be more people who are lucky. And that was just released in October of 2022. Like many women in the US and other countries, she thought she had found her perfect mate, but later realized that he had become her worst nightmare. Thankfully, with some perseverance, Amanda was able to overcome her abusive relationship and uses her experience to help others do the same. And with that, Amanda, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Protecting Your Nest podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It's a topic that we must touch on. I have my NEST and ROPE acronym, and the T in the NEST is for trauma. And that's why, as a low carb doc, I have a chance to touch on a lot of topics, how we think and how, and trauma recovery is what that T is about, net nest. So I think it's important that we think about all of these factors. I found that many of my patients, they struggle in life, and a lot of times they struggle because we're not addressing their previous trauma. So I want to make sure we do that today. So let's talk a little bit about you, who you are, and where you're from, and just give my audience a little brief insights to who you are.
Yeah, sure. Like you said, my name is Amanda. I live in Fairfax County, Virginia right now. I am a 6th grade teacher. I wasn't always a teacher and an author. I grew up in Philadelphia. I worked in Pennsylvania politics for the now soon-to-be governor of Pennsylvania. Decided politics wasn't for me. Didn't live up to the West Wing hype that I thought it would. It's my favorite show. And I was just like, yes, that's what I want. No, nothing like it. So I followed my ex-husband down to Virginia and got my master's degree in teaching. And I have 2 beautiful children. I have an 8-year-old little boy and a 7-year-old little girl.
All right. So you got lucky and got each sex. I'm still the 2 boys who are a little bit older, 23 and 25, but the joy of our lives. In fact, I had to get them out of my recording studio. I said, I have to record, so I had to kick them out. And luckily they set things up for me, so they were nice to do that.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, when mine plays Roblox on my computer, I'm like, I don't know what you did. I need you to fix it.
That's right. So thank you for that intro. And I guess just a little bit more about that man that was in your life. I want to kind of know a little bit about how you met him and your perceptions of him when you first met him.
Yeah, I met him what feels like a million years ago. I think it was like 2008 or 9. We had a mutual friend. My coworker at the time was dating his college roommate, and there was a party, and we met in downtown Philadelphia, and I found him to be very charming. And, to be perfectly honest, I was 28 at the time, and I was ready to settle down. I had been a bridesmaid 10 times. I was like, I'm done with this. I don't want to support anyone else. I want all of you to be standing there for me. Like, I'm ready. My friends were starting to have kids. And so I was looking for someone to marry, and he walked, and like I said, he was very charming.
Yeah, that's about the age I started having kids. So we were able to, I do remember in our 20s, we were going to a lot of weddings, and my mom was like, where's the babies? I'm like, let's get married first. Where are the babies? I'm
Where are
like,
the
wait a minute.
babies?
Yeah, they just want the grandbabies. So
Yep.
you met him. Clearly, what you saw in front of you was a charming man, but
Mhm.
were there any signs that he could turn into the man he became?
Not at first.
Mhm.
There were little things like our eventual mutual friends would be like, yeah, he's amazing, but watch out for his temper. Or they would tell me a story like, oh yeah, he had a fight with his brother and I thought I was going to have to call the police. And I'm like, and he was so mild mannered at first. I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't see that. What are we talking about the same person? Like, I don't see that. Um, and then unfortunately, eventually I did see it a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's and what's interesting about us as human beings, we kind of evolve also. So
Mhm.
even if you think you know what's in front of you, as we evolve, maybe we become something other than what was in front of you, you know? So maybe
Mhm.
some of that was going on, or maybe what was seen and what you heard was kind of became a little bit more of an exaggerated version. So you never know. It's
Yeah.
complicated. So that's another podcast, just trying to figure that out, right? Um, so, in thinking about talking to you, I realized that there were, many forms of domestic violence. So I think
Mhm.
it's to level set. I think people need to understand, what are the different forms of domestic violence that the average person wouldn't even think about.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many more other than just physical violence. There's verbal abuse, which is well known, but there's also the psychological part. It's the constant little like put downs that chip away at your self-esteem till where you eventually believe the things that have continuously been im- repeated to you. There's economic, um, financial abuse. And it stems from withholding money to the psychological working with it. I was on a teacher's salary in Northern Virginia is not an easy thing to
Mhm.
survive on. However, I was paying all the bills
Mm,
and he made six figures and paid the mortgage, which, it was expensive,
yeah.
but I was paying everything for the kids, all the bills. And that was part of the abuse is
Yeah.
having me pay for everything. And the other one, which I hadn't really thought of actually until the email from you, which was the food. I
Oh,
forget
the food, right? The food insecurities, right?
the
Yeah,
food insecurities, and that
that's right.
that ranges from, unfortunately, women in poverty
That's
are
right.
higher statistic rate for domestic violence. So that when a woman escapes from her abuser, there's a lot of times they're escaping with nothing. And food is scarce, got to get on food stamps, find some sort of support out there. And then the other one is it ties into the financial from the abuser, them withholding money to purchase food.
Wow. And one of the things that I learned from Dave Ramsey, who does his get out of debt program,
Mhm.
baby steps and things like that, he talks about how important it is to all the money should go into one pot, right? I mean, there
Mhm.
may be different pots for different reasons, but you know, so I think that's a lesson. That's kind of slightly related but unrelated. But I think it's important if you're married, just be married. It's
Yeah.
one pot. All the money is here. We do a budget. We decide what to do with the budget together. It's not just one
Yeah.
person. And I think when people push back on that, that could be a sign too. So that's very interesting.
Absolutely. And we never did that. We never had
And
combined it.
I think most people don't. Most people kind of they just pay bills as they come. They don't really
Mhm.
think about like long term. But you said because the number one, what Dave Ramsey says, the number one cause of divorce is economic, financial.
Mhm.
So if we can get that right, we greatly increase the risk that we're gonna be on the same page. But again, if we're working as a team,
Yeah.
if you have a partner who has issues, they'll probably reveal themselves and
Mhm.
we kind of go on autopilot. So that's very interesting. And yes, in the community I serve, which tends to be slightly more African American, I'm always thinking about social determinants of health, and I know
Mhm.
that when people have struggle, there tends to be more issues that reveal themselves. And I just think it's important that we think about all of those issues. So thank you
Mhm.
for touching on that. And so you kind of spoke to it a little bit, but clearly it's hard to leave if you're that dependent on somebody. So talk a little bit about some of the other reasons why it's hard to leave an abusive partner.
Yeah. And I just want to say thank you for phrasing the question like that. So many times when I'm in an interview, the question is, well, why did you stay? It's
Right.
like, yes,
Yeah.
and I understand that's a logical question, but there's a multitude of reasons why a victim stays with their abuser. Fear is an obvious one. Um, the psychological abuse goes hand in hand with any other type of abuse that you're experiencing. So you believe you can't survive without them. I believed I could not financially survive without my ex-husband, even though I was paying for everything. The abuse was so severe in that department. I believed there was no way I was going to be able to survive.
Wow.
And it's also when there's children involved too. I mean, it was twofold. It's like, what's worse for my kids? Is it worse
Mhm.
to have them grow up in a house with this type of fighting, or is it worse to divorce and me not there to protect them?
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. And as I hear you say that, I think about, which is worse. I think both are bad.
Yeah.
Like I remember I was on Beat Diabetes, which is a YouTube channel that obviously focuses on diabetes, and he compared a banana to a Hershey's bar. It's a great video for those who are diabetics. Check it out. And both of them are bad for diabetes, although
Mhm.
the surprise is that the banana was worse than a Hershey's bar, which is surprises
That's
people.
surprising.
Yeah, it is. So, but the key is, um, you know, there's never a time when divorce is good for the kids, but
Yeah.
but my logic says that it's still better to be in a safe environment, no abuse, than to be in a situation where it's a second family and you have to go through all those things that come with that. So I think they're both
Oh,
not
yeah.
ideal, but I think and I'm not quoting the research with this, I'm pretty sure it's still better. The
Oh,
kids,
a
yeah,
100%. But when you're in the situation, you're like, well, if I'm not here, I can't protect them.
right,
What am I going
exactly.
to do? You
Right,
know?
that's fair. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So we talked about the challenges of being in an abusive relationship, uh, but there's probably some things that people need to be aware of. You kind of touched on it a little bit in the beginning. And so if you're talking to a friend and you want her to kind of have her ears and eyes open, or his ears and eyes open, what types of behaviors should they be looking for to say, you know what, I may be in an abusive relationship and don't even realize it?
I think anytime your partner is putting you down in any way, I mean, it is normal when you are in a healthy relationship to have a fight. It's not normal to fight all the time. It's not normal to put the other person down.
Mhm,
And anytime the other person seems a little bit more controlling over a certain aspect,
mhm.
whether it's your schedule, money, when you see your friends, any types of hints of control, that is a red flag. There was a great quote, and I'm going to completely mess it up, and it was on Instagram, and it was something like, if those butterflies you feel when you're first in a relationship, those aren't butterflies in a good way. That's your body trying to tell you this is not what you need. Those are your red flags, because when you are truly in a healthy, happy relationship, you get excited to see those person, but those nervous butterflies that you experience, those don't exist because you can
Right.
be yourself and you are comfortable with that person.
That's amazing that you can have emotions of kind of happy to see or be with somebody, but also have that other emotion where you're not feeling comfortable. Oh my God.
Mhm.
It's kind of, that's a horrible way to live. I mean, imagining literally going home, which should be a safe space, and
Mhm.
you're kind of tiptoeing around every day,
Mhm.
trying not to push or trigger that person. That
Yep.
that's not good, you know?
Mm. Mm-mm.
Whew,
No,
so, hey, I'm just
not a fun way to live.
no, right, not at all. Are there some absolute okay, like we're talking about, okay, how a person talks to you, et cetera, but are there moments when, okay, 911 is an emergency when we have to get out of this relationship like immediately? Any moments, anything that comes to mind for that?
Yeah, I mean, my moment and how I got out was a 911 call at 9 o'clock at night. He had threatened to chop up my body and kill me before the police got to the house. And then he threatened to get a gas can and a lighter and burn down the house with me and the children in it. Went as far as to go get the gas can and the lighter. And that's when I grabbed my babies at the time
Oh,
and we sprinted to the neighbor's house and I called 911. So anytime, God forbid, I hope that never happens to anyone ever. But anytime there is a threat of physical violence or there is physical violence, that no matter what situation you end up in after this relationship, it is better than whatever you're experiencing now.
yeah, and that and I think, I think intuitively, even when you're in a relationship, which you probably don't even realize is as abnormal as it is, we
Yeah.
tend to think bad things are going to happen to other people, like those extreme things you see on
Mhm,
TV, or maybe even people hearing this, oh, that happens to other people.
mhm.
But man, everybody can have that moment when they kind of lose it, and they're going to have it more likely, it seems, if they have a history of, again, not controlling their temper. Those are
Yeah.
the people who are probably going to go to the extreme because it's like this built up anger
Mhm,
from wherever it's from. So I could see how that makes sense. We just want to keep people safe. So I really
mhm,
appreciate your insights there. Another thing about this that is intriguing is, it seems like if you're in a relationship, um, you should be, um, able to just get help. But I could only imagine that shame can kick in, right?
mhm.
And when you're so shamed about how you feel about your situation, why didn't I do this a long time ago? It may like paralyze you. So
Mhm.
how do you overcome this shame that I'm sure a lot of people feel when they're in a situation like this?
Yeah, shame is a huge part of why victims stay with their abusers as well. Once you realize what you're experiencing is truly abuse, then it's I can't believe that I let this happen. I mean, I'm an intelligent woman. I have 2 master's degrees. I'm also from Philly. I don't take any crap. And like, and I'm in a severely abusive relationship.
Wow.
And that was a hard saying that I'm a domestic violence survivor is still a hard thing for me to say. And what really helped me, because after that night I called 911, the police came, he was arrested. There was no turning back. I had to call my parents and tell them what was happening. I had to call my best friends. I had to swallow that shame I felt. And I was talking to my sister one day and I was opening up to her, telling her the shame I felt. And she's like, you've got to get through your head
Mhm.
that you are not the one who should feel shame.
Right.
You are the victim. He is the one who should feel shame. He's the one who should be embarrassed that he treated his family this way. He is the one who should be feeling these emotions. Your emotions are valid, but stop taking those emotions from him. Stop trying to, I forget the wording she used, but it was like, stop trying to own those emotions. Those
Mhm.
need to be his. You have enough to deal with.
Wow. Did your family know what was going on prior to that moment? They
No,
didn't know.
they didn't know. They knew we had fights,
Right.
um, but they did not know.
And everybody has fights, I guess. So I guess
Yeah,
that's not too unusual.
yeah,
Uh,
they didn't know.
and how long were you in the relationship when it was dysfunctional before you had that moment?
We were together for 10 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
It's a long
So
time.
you look like you're just getting out of high school. So that's
Oh, well, thank you.
so that's awesome. Oh
I'm
my
glad
God.
this is recorded so I can play it back for everyone. I'm like, do you hear what he said? Everyone.
That's right. That's right. Make sure the whole family knows. That is too funny. So, okay. So my next question is, okay, you're in the state of shame, and you're trying to, you need support, right?
Yeah.
So, and you may not get the support while you're in a shame state, but at some point you're gonna reveal it, and then you need that additional support. So how important in the world I live in, which tends to be metabolic health, reduce the carbs so you won't be diabetic, etc., a lot of people struggle because they don't have support, right?
Mhm.
So, and this is even more intense in some ways. So, how do you, get that support? Where are you getting it from? Because you need to have that so you can rebuild your life. So, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do not know. I would not be where I am right now if it wasn't for the support of my parents, my siblings, my friends. I mean, they completely engulfed me and my children in love. And the support varied from just being there for me to just coming over to my house and sending me upstairs to go take a nap and go in my kitchen and make my kids dino nuggets. You need support in order to heal from trauma and escape an abusive relationship. And if a person doesn't have that type of support from the family and friends, there's so many organizations out there that help with that support. They help point you in the right direction.
Okay. Could you speak to just a little bit to a lot of people would see a beautiful young lady and say, what I mean, why would you stay in this relationship? You're attractive, you're successful, you're educated. Just speak a little bit to why that is not giving you the level of confidence that that people think it should, because that's what people think. You got it all worked out, so just leave and find the next guy. So
Yeah,
your thoughts on that?
I wish it was that simple. When would have done it years ago. No, it was the psychological abuse. It was the chipping away of my self-esteem. I mean, I truly believed what he said. No one would ever want me. No
Mm,
one was ever going to want me besides him.
mm,
And
okay.
it wasn't, and I can't put my finger on exactly what flipped for me a
Mhm.
couple months prior to that incident. I don't know if it was the start of the Me Too movement and I was listening to that more, or the verbal abuse started going towards my son. So the mama bear started coming out. It could have been a combination. I don't know what it was, but something flipped in my psyche. And I was like, this is not how I'm going to live my life. I don't care if I'm single for the rest of my life. I'm not going to be in this relationship anymore. I need to get out.
That's fair. Another thing that came to my mind is this idea of everybody feeling like they deserve love, they deserve to be loved. So what's your thoughts on, like, what would you say to a person who is saying, I gotta stay because he loves me? Just the ideal of this need for love. That's like a
Mhm.
primal, we need food, water, and love.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly.
So how do you feel about the importance of having that, and most importantly, having the understanding that you don't have to get the love from the one that's being abusive?
Yeah, I mean, it's really trying to get through to the victim that what your experiencing is not love.
Mm,
Love should not hurt in this way. Love is hard and it's complicated, and when it's a good love, it's worth fighting for. But this isn't love. What you're experiencing is not love. It's not a partnership. It's not. And what triggered for me one day, and we were having a fight, and like I said, I have a little girl, and I just started thinking, what would I do if my daughter was in this type of relationship?
hmm
How would I feel if this is what she was experiencing day in and day out?
mm. I like that. Anytime you put things in perspective that way,
Mhm,
that takes it to a whole new level. And I think that's really important that we all pause for a moment
mhm.
and kind of leave ourselves and have that perspective. You know, when it comes to, so we should live in a world where we're safe and secure. And we should live in a world where if I, go to the authorities about what's happened to me, they should be able to, embrace you, make sure you have access to resources. And my question is that what happened in your experience? Did the criminal justice system treat you the way you expected them to?
I would say yes and no. The night I'd called 911, the officers that responded were amazing, very supportive, got me a restraining order. The aftermath, they set me up with a domestic violence advocate. The attorneys I hired, all of that was very supportive. And I would say I felt like the criminal justice system was working in my favor until the day I showed up to court, because he had criminal charges against him. And they told me nothing was going to happen because this was the first time I called 911.
Oh man.
He got probation. So I got an extended protective order, but the DA told me that nothing, because I had never called 911 before.
I'm gonna
And
tell
I
you
looked
something.
at him and I was like, you know what? This is why domestic violent victims don't come forward, because nothing happens. So if I had called 10 times prior to this, would he be getting something right now? And then unfortunately, the most dangerous part for a domestic violence victim is when they decide to leave, because the abuser then realizes they have no control. So then
Right.
they start to lose control. And that happened. He was stalking me. He had convinced a neighbor to give him camera feed. So their camera was pointing right at my driveway. So he had 24 hours
What?
view, of my driveway. I called the cops 6 times and they said they could do nothing.
They could do nothing.
They could do nothing. There's nothing they could do. They can't prove it.
Okay.
I'm like, there's a camera
I mean, right.
pointed at my driveway. Here is a text message from him talking about what's happening.
That's amazing. It seems like that seems simple. And first of all, how do they expect the average person to have any idea of any of these rules? When I used to do real estate, I had a broker's license in real estate. I kind of knew more than the average person because I had a broker's license in real estate. I still got an attorney because they tended to be buddies with the judges, if I ever need to do an eviction, for example. But how do they expect the average person to really know, oh, you didn't know you were supposed to call 10 times before we would actually do something? That's just ridiculous. And I just don't understand that,
Neither do
So
I. And his slap on the wrist was for assault because he had thrown water on me. And apparently when you throw water on someone, that's assault. I'm like, I had no idea.
that's crazy. Okay. All right. So okay, so I'm listening to you. I'm one of those people who have experienced an abusive relationship. I'm in an abusive relationship. I know somebody who's in an abusive relationship. When they pick up your book, one of the lucky ones, what are they expected to learn from your book and walk away from your book knowing?
That it's not an easy road, but it's a road worth taking. I wrote the book partly because it was therapeutic for me. I never really thought I would publish it. But one of my main things in publishing it is when I was going through it, I desperately wanted to know I was going to be okay. I wanted to pick up a book about someone like me and know that they were okay, that the road was rough, but they made it through. And the only thing I could find, and I love her, was Tina Turner's memoir. And she's amazing. Like, I love her, but I am not a multi-million-dollar Grammy Award winning singer. I mean, I am in the shower, but not in like actual real life. So my hope is that someone reads it, starts to recognize some of the things that they're experiencing and realizing that it's going to be rough, but they're going to be okay.
Awesome. And you mentioned earlier you are teaching. So
Mhm.
what level do you teach?
I teach 6th grade.
All right, cool. So we want to make sure all our beautiful children are protected and understand how to think through this so that when they become beautiful adults, they would have not suffered because they kind of knew what to look for. And I just hope your book provides a way for people to think about things they hadn't thought about. And we just gave the example of how the laws work. Sometimes just being exposed to a different way of thinking For
Mhm.
example, we had conversations about concealed carry in my home recently, and my son did a lot of research, and the stuff he was talking about, I had never thought about. I don't watch the news a lot, so all the stuff that's going on, I'm like
Mhm.
oblivious to it, right? But he's like, "No, Dad, you have to be aware," and I think awareness is so important. So I really appreciate you giving us some awareness,
Mhm.
and I really think it's important that when we have an experience like this, we need to share it because it may inspire just enough people to
Mhm.
make sure just enough people don't have to experience this anymore. So,
Yeah, that's my
so my
goal.
so my podcast is protecting your nest, and it's about multiple aspects of our lives: nutrition, exercise, less stress, more sleep, trauma recovery, how we think, relationships. So I guess we should have said that in the beginning. This is about relationships, staying away from toxins that harm us, and the pollutants and things like that, and organisms that harm us. We can call even this organisms that harm us, pollutants. You can call it whichever way you like to say it. And then of course protecting our emotions and
Mhm.
making sure our life experience is service. So when you think about your journey, how you're gonna focus over the next 12 months, what other aspects of your life do you plan to give special attention to?
I'm not done healing. Trauma is something that lives with you. I have a diagnosis of PTSD. So my focus is continuing to heal and
Mhm.
be as healthy and happy and present as I can be for not just myself, but my children.
Yeah, I like that, and they so deserve that, and I'm pretty sure they will thrive even more now that you've kind of, taken your journey, and now that you're sharing your message of healing with others. It's just such a great gift to give the world when someone who goes through something opens their mouth, starts to write, and put things out for the public to consume. So we really appreciate that. And speaking of that, so what's the best way for my listeners to not only find your book, but to maybe find you in social media or anywhere else you're hanging out?
Yeah. So the best way is, again, it's one of the lucky ones. And on my right under AE Lee, they can find it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Google Play, and Apple. I also find it on my website, which is authораelee.com. And you can follow me on Instagram, which is author AE Lee.
Perfect. So thank you again. I really I learn a lot, and I really appreciate these conversations because it's so important that we have the conversations, we give people hope that they can find a better path. And
Mhm.
again, just happy that you're out there doing this work. So thanks again
Thank
for
you.
podcast. Okay. And for
Thank
those
you.
who are watching today, Amanda shared her personal story of survival. We learned many aspects of domestic violence, why it's hard to leave a abusive partner, and what we have to do to overcome it, and remove that shame and struggle that we sometimes suffer from. So if you know anybody who needs support, they're struggling emotionally, physically in an abusive relationship, make sure that Amanda's book become one of the resources you give them. And of course, they have the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and that number is 1-800-799-7233. What I'll say personally is to promise you that you're not alone and that help is not far away. And I hope that you enjoyed Amanda's story, because Amanda's story can also be yours. So for all those who enjoyed this episode, let's make 2023 the best year ever. Let's make it a new day where there's less pain, less shame, less suffering, so that the next year and the years that follow will allow us to live our purpose and enjoy the lives God intended. So I appreciate all of you for checking out this episode with us today. And until the next episode, I ask that you continue to be safe, be well, and continue to protect your nest. You've been listening to Protecting Your Nest with Dr. Tony Hampton. For more, visit drtonyhampton.com.